Hey guys, it's Miss Becker here. We're going to go ahead and do the first half of chapter 2. This one's kind of a long chapter, so we're going to split it up into two parts. We'll do about the first 20 slides or so, and then we'll do the second half in part 2 so you guys can take a break and get whatever done that you need. So let's go ahead and get started. So we are in chapter 2, which is just talking about how interviewing itself is an interpersonal communication process. So we've already talked about how in an interview there's always two parties. There's only ever two parties, because if you have more than two parties, it's just a small group interaction. So obviously these parties, these people, are different and complex individuals that have different life experiences, different belief systems. But in the case of an interview, both really have to work on collaborating in an interview to be successful. So we are connected interpersonally because we both have a stake in it, or both parties have a stake in it. But you can have different types of relationships and a relational history between these people, and that will affect how your interview goes. If it's a very distant relationship, then you have to work on building rapport. But if you're interviewing a close friend, you might know some things about them that, maybe you wouldn't want an interviewer to know. So maybe you don't want to hire them because you know they're perpetually 15 minutes late everywhere. And as much as you care about them as a friend, maybe you don't hire them because of that. But you have intimate or close friend relationships. You know each other very, very well. More casual relationships, such as a coworker or acquaintance that you kind of see on a fairly regular basis, but maybe you don't really hang out outside of that. Functional relationships, so they are serving a function. So doctors, you may be friendly with them, but their purpose is more functional. You are not friends because they are serving a purpose. They could be formal relationships, such as like the president of a college, the CEO of a company, the president of, did I say the president of a college or president of a company? I don't remember. But someone who's very much higher on the totem pole, the hierarchical scale than you are. And like I said, kind of the distance ones, you don't really know. It's not really formal. It may just literally be a single meeting or, one of very, very few meetings that you guys will ever have. So, in our interview parties, the two circles, we all have our own, life experiences. We have our own personality traits. We have our separate cultures and environments that we have grown up in. We have different educational experiences, just general life experiences that are different. So you have to kind of find the place where those two overlap and you can build common ground, build rapport, so that you have a base to do this interview off of. In relational competence, if you are relationally competent, you will know the part that you are going to play in an interaction. Are you student, teacher, interviewer, interviewee? Are you maybe mom in some relational interactions, with your kids? Do you understand the rules and norms of an interaction? I'm sure we've all had that, friend or colleague, and we go in for a handshake, they go in for a hug. That may not be great relational competence, because if you don't know them very well, that might be breaking the rules or the norms of that said social interaction. You go into a job interview, you're probably not going to go in for a hug for your interviewer, right? And know when to adapt and when to not. If people have different communication styles, sometimes we want to adapt to that and take on, I guess, to an extent, kind of some of their traits, like how they do things. Like if you like someone, you unconsciously mirror their behavior. But sometimes we should kind of stick to ourselves, and maybe we don't adapt to their communication styles, or maybe their particular slang that they might be using, because if that's not who we are, we don't want to portray someone we're not. But when you go into an interview, you want to have a little bit of history, quote unquote, on the person or with the person. Having something on someone sounds kind of bad, but literally a quick Google search could, save your butt sometimes. So, because when you know the history of someone or of, a company, you do know what to expect. Getting started may not be as difficult because you may have looked up something and seen, where you have in common. Um, but, you can have stereotypes of people. There's definitely cultural differences. Americans, I don't know, I would probably say that our generation, or at least in my experience, most of us don't really see people as really strangers. They're typically just like, oh yeah, well, we can get along. Our friendships don't typically take too long to develop. But if you're legitimately meeting someone for the first time and you haven't had a chance to, look them up and kind of see who they are, never met them before, you won't know what to expect. Trying to find common ground and build up that rapport and get the conversation or get the interview going will probably be difficult. um, you have some people who get together and they're both super super chatterboxes and everything's just speaking, they're talking over each other. For some people that's totally fine. For other people that might be really annoying. But maybe you get two people who tend to be pretty quiet and tend to focus more on listening together, and maybe not a lot gets said because they're both just trying to listen and be respectful of each other. What information can safely be shared with this person? So just some things to think about when you're going into a situation for the first time. Do you have a history with this person? And if not, is there anything you can do to kind of familiarize yourself with them so you're not going in totally blind? Sorry. Relational dimensions, like some of them are very critical to interviews because they can make or break an interview. They can make or break a friendship or first interaction. So you have similarity. So we tend to get along with people who are more similar to us. That's not saying we can't make friends with people who are different. It's just saying, on first glance, we will gravitate towards people who are similar to us. So if I walk into a classroom for the first time, and I don't know anybody, I am probably going to go sit down by someone else who is, brunette with glasses, because just basically from looking at them, I can say, okay, well, maybe we have some similarity. But that could be shared gender, shared race, same cultural norms, same values, same educational experience. Like, oh, hey, we're both alumni of Pittsburgh State, or hey, we're both alumni of EAC. Experiences, beliefs or belief system, similar interests, like, oh, I see that you have a tennis trophy. I also played tennis, da 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 da. And expectations. Do you both have similar expectations of this communication interaction? And sometimes these similarities are literally just on the surface. Maybe someone just looks like you or talks like you, kind of acts like you, but they might not be. That could just be the act that they put on for work. Inclusion. So, are you acting with the other person in mind? Are you being inclusive of them, getting them involved in it? So when people feel cared about and being like they're included and asking for their opinion, then they are more motivated to speak up, give their opinion, to listen to your opinion, and do that general communication interaction. Um, Affection, this is not saying like, oh, you want to fall in love with your interviewers. No, because that probably be a little strange, but you do you. But it's just bringing warmth and respect into that situation. So you may not have to be friends with everybody in it, but you should at least be friendly, be warm, be welcoming. And it's a we mindset. What can we do rather than, oh, you are going to go do this while I do this. So using that more we language rather than the you, me. And if you have too strong of feelings one way or the other, you need to manage those. So maybe you walk in and you say, this person is a total jerk and I don't want anything to do with them. You might have, if you legitimately want the job, then you might have to fake it for a little while. But if the person's really a jerk, you might have to really evaluate if that's really a job that you want. Maybe you feel too much and you're just like super, super attracted to this person. You need to tone it down, take a deep breath, take a step back. I know I've been talking specifically more about job interviews for this, but it also works for other types of interviews, job interviews, medical interviews, persuasive interviews. It's they're all really about building rapport and getting someone else to like you so that they are willing to talk to you. Okay. More relational dimensions, you have control. So you guys both have a hand in controlling what comes next. You have a hand in controlling of whether this interaction succeeds or fails. And obviously with face-to-face communication, once something is said, it can't be taken back. If you lose your cool and lose control and say or do something that may not have been the best decision, then it has caused failure in that situation. Hopefully it's salvageable, but sometimes some things just aren't. And then, of course, there is trust. So do you trust this other person? And for a lot of people, that's what gets them the job. They're personable and they seem trustworthy. So are you honest, sincere, reliable? Do you seem fair? Do you seem even-tempered? So when you have that trust, people feel safe in saying their opinion. So maybe if they have any fears about this job, if you've built that rapport and built that trust, then people feel willing to tell you about it so that you can then assuage those fears, I guess is the term. When we have interviews, our roles are pretty much always interchanging. So, the interviewer doesn't ask questions the entire time. They also listen. The interviewer typically allows the interviewee to ask a couple questions of their own, and therefore the roles switch. And there is two approaches to interviewing, and these might get a little confusing with one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later. But you have the directive approach and the non-directive approach. So directive, it's very straightforward. Like literally, it's just pretty much as it sounds. So here is the purpose. We are trying to figure out where you'd fit best in the company. We're trying to figure out if we want to hire you, or we are trying to figure out, what is wrong with you medical-wise. So this is going to be informal or it's going to be very formal. The questions are going to be, 1, 2, 3, answer them to the best of your ability, and then we will move on. So surveys and health questionnaires tend to be very, very directive because it's like, okay, do you have any allergies to medications? Okay, no, perfect, yes, okay, what are they? Boom, boom, boom. Okay, next question. How long have you been experiencing this symptom? Okay, boom, next question, so on and so forth. And then the non-directive, the interviewee has significant control over it. So the person who is answering gets to decide on their length of answers. The questions aren't just, yes, no, closed questions. It's, oh, well, how did you feel about da 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 da? Oh, well, I thought da 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 da. They get a more control of the interview climate, the formality. So a lot more open-ended questions so that the interviewee can kind of give the interview the direction that they want it to go. So when you're deciding on an approach, just kind of be flexible. Like definitely if you're doing a survey, if you need just really straightforward information, definitely go directive. You might have a couple more open-ended questions there as well. But if you need very specific information, you might do more directive. If you're just looking for someone's story and you want them to tell about this experience or what they did in this situation, you may use a more non-directive approach and non-directive questioning. The video for this is over here in Canvas. It is this first one, Louis Theroux, Relational Dimensions. It is about 4 minutes. And did Louis Theroux use a more directive approach or non-directive approach? Okay, so here's just an example of switching the roles. So we have our people with all their experiences. Oh, sorry. Their personal opinions, their beliefs, all that jazz in the interview, and they're switching roles. So they're going from interviewer, this R, to interviewee, and then back. So, what makes you think that you'd be a good fit for this position? Well, well, what kind of person is your company actually looking for? Oh, well, our company is looking for this type. So perceptions of the interviewer and the interviewee. So in general, perception is a really big thing, particularly in communication. I'm going to check if there's no slide on this. Okay, so technically, but also like technically not. So you have your perceptions of self. So how do you feel about yourself? How do you see yourself? And how do you present yourself? How do you want yourself to be presented or perceived based on the way that you present yourself? And then when you're sitting across the table or across the computer screen from this other party, what are your initial perceptions? Why are they important? Are you stereotyping that person based on how they look or how they talk? How do you think that they are perceiving you? How do you think they want to be perceived? So, and you are switching those while you're doing the interview, because everything you say changes the perception of you from the person. So you guys have seen me yawn probably 2 or 3 times in here. So maybe at the beginning you perceive me as like, woohoo, totally gung-ho, but as I start yawning, you're just like, man, she needs to take a nap. Both of those perceptions might be correct. Like, definitely getting to the point in the day where I'm super tired, and if you're perceiving me as that, then you are, totally on the point. But if you also perceive me at the beginning as, very enthusiastic about interviewing, then yes, that's also true, because I care about this, I care about what I do. I want to give that perception because that is how I feel. But, there's other things like, yawning, perceiving as tired. That's also happening too. I can be both at the same time. Sorry. One of the big things nowadays too, especially with how small the world is getting, is cultural differences. I think we typically have a pretty good chunk of students who have traveled internationally. Sorry, a lot of which do, end up in Asian countries or South American countries, Eastern European countries, which are more collectivist cultures. So some of you guys have probably seen a lot of this individualistic versus collectivist firsthand. Here in the US, we are very much individualistic. Our focus is on the self and our personal successes and victories, while in more collectivist cultures, it's more about group achievement and group image, and that the team has succeeded rather than this individual person. And what does this have to do with interviewing, you ask? Well, a lot. Because more and more we see, people working on teams and being more collaborative. There's even a term in education now called collaborative learning, which is definitely more of a collectivist thing because it's focusing on group achievement and working well in groups. So I know when I was in school, it was definitely more about the individual stuff, like who can have their hand up fastest and answer a question, who as an individual person can, get this done, who's the smartest, who's the best reader, rather than, as a class or as a team, can we come together and all help each other succeed? So that might be kind of a cultural shift that you guys see over the course of your lifetime, moving from more of, the American individualism to more world collectivism, and saying, okay, well, how well can you work in a team? If we get a panel in here to do your interview, are you able to handle that? If we have a group interview, are you able to handle that? If you get put on a team, can you work well with them? Do we want to hire you? You may be really qualified and really good at what you do, but if you can't work well with others, are you the type of person that we want in our work environment? Okay, sweet. Okay, so more on perceptions. I think that probably should have switched with the other slide, but we'll backtrack a step. It's been a week. So kind of back to our perceptions of self, what we were talking about before. We were talking about the individualist and collectivist cultures. But what we perceive ourselves to be may be more important than what we actually are. So how do we see ourselves? Because how we see ourselves, that's how we treat ourselves. So if we see ourselves as like some unsuccessful, piece of crap, even if we happen to be very successful and very well loved, then that's how we're going to treat ourselves, and other people are going to see it, and then they're going to treat us like we're an unsuccessful piece of crap, because that's how we treat ourselves. So if we have this kind of bad self-concept, then, it's kind of that vicious cycle. But if we perceive ourselves to be successful and, good at what we do, even if we may not be the best at our job, other people will pick up that we think that we are. And, that's confidence. People are attracted to confidence. They want people who are confident in their abilities, like not people who are arrogant and can say, I never make any mistakes. But, if you're confident, even in your ability to just learn new things, that can be very helpful in job interviews in particular. There's also this thing called self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we convince ourselves of something, then we might succeed in it. Or if we convinced ourselves that we're going to fail, then that might just be what we do. So an example of this is you have this big test coming up in chemistry or biology or whatever hard class that you're in this semester. You're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, no matter how much I study, I am going to bomb this test. So what's even the point? Like, I'm not good at insert subject here. I'm not good at math or English or chemistry, physics. I'm not good at blah, 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 blah. And so then you don't even study. You drag yourself down, and then you go into the test and you're just like, yep, I was right. I didn't know any of this. And of course, you bomb the test. That's that self-fulfilling prophecy. But you can also use it to your advantage and say, I know that this might not be my strongest suit, or I feel like it's not, but I am going to try my hardest. And I am going to freaking pass this thing. So you study well, you get extra help if needed, and then you go into that test with a positive attitude and say, I have done my best, and my best is good enough. And then you probably do better than you think you did. Obviously, like if you're, like me, then you can convince yourself of anything, right? But it only, like, if you have the ability to do it, then, believe in yourself. Insert a positive motivational speech here. And then our perceptions of the other party. So the way you think of the other party and perceive them can definitely influence how you approach this interview and how you interact as it goes on and how you interact with that other person. So if you approach this interview as like, oh my gosh, I know this guy, he is like the most airheaded person in the entire world, and you treat the interview like that, then that's, it's definitely going to affect how you do on it, because if you're not taking it seriously because you think the other person's an airhead, then that'll be reflected on your score on it. Or I guess the fact that if you do or don't get the job. And then our interactions with that person, sorry, will either alter or reinforce these perceptions. So if we think this person, because maybe we know them in passing as, a bumbling idiot, and they come into the interview and like drop their papers all over the table because they, tripped over something, that's definitely going to reinforce our perception of them as like, oh, are we sure this person should be doing that? But maybe they come in and they're very confident and you're like, wow, I've never seen this side of them. Like, that's kind of cool that, when you put them in the work situation, they change into a totally different person than when I see them, out at Walmart or whatever. I feel like if I go and edit out of all of my yawns, it's going to take me like 15 minutes. So I'm probably just going to leave them in, and I do apologize. So when we're in these communication interactions, these level 1, 2, and 3 interactions, it's very general for all of communication. A lot of this stuff is just kind of true in general that you can apply to all communication. But we've been specifically using it obviously in job interview situations because that's what most of you will probably use it in. But we have level 1, 2, and 3 interactions. So the first level, level 1, it's very safe and non-threatening. It's just very general conversations. So, oh, how you feeling about this weather? Oh, well, it's been too gosh darn hot, 107, all my plants are dying. The scorpions are trying to get in. I've seen like 16 tarantulas around my house. It's all very safe. You're not really giving a lot of out of like personal detail. You don't have a close relationship with this person who you're having the level 1 interaction with, and that's why it's level 1, because you're kind of getting to know them. You're building that rapport and building that relationship. Some communication interactions may never move past level 1, and that's okay. That's just people who you meet in passing, talk to once or twice, and it's like, okay, have a good life. Nice to meet you. So some of the reasons why it may be level 1 is maybe you have a very little trust with that person because you just don't know them. The issue may be very controversial. So, if someone walked up to you to do an interview, like a journalistic style interview or whatever, or an interview for a video and just say, what's your political party? You might be like, I don't want to talk about that because politics might be controversial at the time. Or the conversation could be between high status parties and low status parties. So if, the president of the United States comes up and starts talking to me, that's a very high status party. I am a very low status party in that. It would probably be very safe and non-threatening interaction, just very general conversations like, oh, how do you like in Arizona? That's cool. Okay, I'm going to sneak away so the Secret Service don't keep looking at me weird. You have level 2 interaction. So with these, you have to trust the person. Some of these questions might be a little risky. So this reveals how you feel about something or your personal opinion or potentially harmful information. So when you get these level 2, people are typically trying to cooperate with you. So, if they ask, oh, what's your political party or your political affiliation, or how do you feel about XYZ policy that Governor Ducey just, proposed, you're going to try to cooperate with them because maybe it's one of your friends that but maybe that you're not like super, super great friends with, and you're just like, well, I mean, how I feel about Ducey, so da-da-da-da-da-da. Or, I kind of think that that's a good idea, or I kind of think that that's not really a good idea because of, XYZ, or, so on and so on. So you're giving a little information, but not too much, because that's it for level 3 interactions, of which it's full disclosure of feelings, beliefs, and attitudes. And you definitely make it more than you bargained for. Typically, level 3 interactions are uncommon. They are extremely uncommon. in job interviews, but maybe if you're doing a survey or if your best friend is interviewing you for a project, you might tell them those things because with a survey you have anonymity, so no one really knows. It's like, oh my gosh, did you see what John said about insert whatever here. Uh, so this video we will watch, well, you guys will watch to see what kind of levels of disclosure, and it's Louis Theroux and the Ku Klux Klan. It's about 9 minutes, so I think there is some language and stuff in there that, just kind of a forewarning, like not everything there is probably comfortable to listen to, but it's a really interesting look on questions and the things that people can say without saying anything, or these kind of like, well, we're trying to cooperate with you, but we don't also want to say all of what we're thinking. And then some people who are just like, yeah, woohoo. And there's a really interesting line in there about what people will say on camera, with a camera like right there in their face versus what they say when other people aren't watching. So here's just kind of a little figure to show all of the things we've talked about so far just put into one. So we have our two different parties where we have that overlapping belief system, or wherever we are building rapport right there in the center. We have the exchanging of roles, so both people asking questions, answering questions, listening, speaking, the perceptions going back and forth, and therefore changing how people ask certain questions. So, if you perceive someone as more, liberally minded or more conservative, you might change how you ask certain questions to them. And then you have the different levels of interaction. So the thickest and the longest line is level 1, so they are most common. 2, a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller, they are less common. And then you have 3, which is real skinny and pretty short. So you have the fewest of those type of interactions. And that is where we are going to end part 1 because my throat needs a break and probably a slight nap. But if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me a message, shoot me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So don't forget to go by and watch those videos, and I will see you here in a couple minutes in part 2.